Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another show of Fuente and Meerapfel present Meet the Professor. Good morning, world.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Papo. What's up?
Morning.
Today,
Hey, Papo.
Afternoon to you. Good morning, Carlito.
Hey,
Right.
Papi. How are you, my brother?
Great to see you.
Good to see you
Today
too. Guys looking good,
is
Eric.
a very
Morning, Carlos. Good
special
afternoon.
day. We have the Newmans on the show with us, Mr. Bobby and Eric Newmans. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you, and we are very, very excited to hear everything you have to say today. Eric, Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us into your living room.
We're honored to be here. Thank you, Jeremiah. I've known your family forever. I knew your father quite well. I knew your grandfather. Got a lot of stories on your grandfather too. So we go back many, many years. And I'm
Jeremiah, Jeremiah, isn't it coincidental that everybody brings up your grandfather?
Yes, I know. Yeah, we're going to have a little disclaimer on the show here about my grandfather.
Stories I think that we got to avoid.
Jeremiah, Eric and I met in our father, we met your father in 1970. Eric and I, for the first time at the Cameroon tobacco auction. Eric was 21 and I was 19 years old, and we're still 39 years old. But your grandfather was a legend, absolute legend.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, that's one way to qualify him, and I'm glad. Keep saying so. That's the words we want to hear on the show. He definitely was a character, and he spoke very, very, very highly of your father, Stanford.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I know they had a lot in common. One thing was the love for Cameroon. The other thing was being true and real tobacco men, having an immense amount of knowledge and love for this industry. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your father.
Yes. Eric, you want to start?
I got a story here. When my dad told us this, our father told us this story. He was having dinner with your grandfather in Havana, 1959, 1960, and we're having dinner. And your grandfather says, "Excuse me, I need to make a telephone call." He comes back. About 20 minutes later, my father was thinking, "We're having dinner, social dinner, and you're leaving me. Where do you come back?" And my father asked, "Oh, Heller, who do you know here?" I had to call one of my old school friends. "Who was your old school friends?" "Che Guevara." And he said, "You talking? Yeah, they went to school together." And my father said, "Okay, I understand. I guess Che Guevara is more important than me. That's okay." But anyway, your grandfather touched a lot of bases in his life.
Yes, he did. That's for sure. That's for sure. But going back to Stanford, I remember having the pleasure of spending time with him as a little boy, and then later in life, he was unbelievable. He was a man with an immense amount of presence, unbelievable knowledge. Always had a cigar on his lips.
Right.
You know, tell us a little bit of how he started. What would he be saying if he was on the show today?
Bobby?
Dad could not believe how far our family has come. We are leveraged buyout. Eric, Dad, and I bought all 17 of our relatives out in 1986, February 14th. And 3 weeks after our leveraged buyout, Carlos Fuente Sr. came to see our father, and said he wanted to close his factory in Tampa, and he wanted to concentrate all his efforts in Dominican Republic. And we've been business partners. We've always friends with the Fuente family. But I tell you, my father, if he were here, he would tell you, and he said this before publicly, if he was down to his last dollar, he'd give 50 cents to the Fuentes. We've had a long, incredible 36-year relationship with them, doing business with each other. And Dad would be proud of the way we've been fighting the last 10 years against the FDA for getting this regulation off our backs. It's taken 5 years off of my life, but he would be amazed that how far our company has come, how far the industry has come. Eric?
This is our 125th year in business. About 100 of those years have been one challenge after another. We have gone through, as with the Fuentes. We in the Fuentes this is not our first pandemic, not our first rodeo. The Fuentes were in business. We were in business in 1918. Both Carlos and our grandfathers started our respective businesses. We've been through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, you know, changing consumer comments, changing consumers' belief in the industry. We went through the Cuban embargo, which was really tough. Gone through smoking bans, gone through excessive taxes, and I think that the reason Jose and I were talking about a little bit earlier, the reason that Fuentes have been around over 100 years was we've been able to been around was to embrace change. All these challenges we've had, challenges are a way of doing business. That's the way we've had this latest one with the FDA. I remember talking to Carlos Senior, and we're talking about 5 years ago before he died about FDA and all this. He said, that's nothing. Carlos, when he was making cigars, he was the last cigar manufacturer to be alive when using Cuban tobacco. Carlos Sr. remembered the Cuban embargo, and he thinks all of a sudden in Tampa one time had 150 cigar factories. We moved from Cleveland to Tampa in 1954, had 10 factories. What did the Tampa cigar industry in was the Cuban embargo. One time Tampa made, Carrie and I were talking about this yesterday, Tampa one time made 500 million cigars a year. Most of them were clear Havana filler, Havana binder, Havana wrapper. Many more cigars were made in Tampa of Cuban tobacco than were made in Cuba. And all of a sudden, in 1962, President Kennedy says you can't get more Cuban tobacco. That was the beginning of the end of the industry as we know it in Tampa. And it's hard to believe. And Senior was telling me that, as much as problem as FDA is, can you imagine you're a chef, you make a famous dish, all of a sudden the government says you can't use your ingredients in your dish anymore. There was panic in the streets. So many of the factories closed or try to use other tobaccos. And it's been one challenge after another. Dad has always been politically involved. He's always gave money my father was very political. If somebody's running for office, he would give money it's like betting on 2 horses. He bet on both sides, the Republican and the Democrat, make sure he was covered either way. So Dad was very political, but he would be amazed that this
Hi,
is the
everybody in the office. Lunch is outside. If you could come out and grab your box lunch and a couple of special gifts from the Newman.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's just a factory. We're having a special lunch.
It's good to see that you're actually at work.
Yeah, well, yes, and everyone's in the factory here in Tampa, so which is all good, and everyone's healthy.
All right. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to read out. You guys have a huge hello from Cynthia. She welcomes both Eric and Bobby to the show.
Thank you.
And then obviously the entire Fuente headquarters in Tampa, Liana, Carl, Mike, Caitlin, Tommy, and Camilo are all on the show to support you guys today. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
So tell us about, obviously you're one of the oldest families in the business, 125 years of operation this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But it doesn't stop there. You have a brilliant son who's come in to work with you, who I've had the pleasure of knowing, well, most of his life, actually. Tell us a little bit about Drew. Where is Drew?
Well, first of all, Drew's in Brooklyn. About 2 months ago, he made his mother meet grandparents for the first time.
Mazel tov.
Not only that, he named his son, our grandson, after our father. It's William Stanford Newman. So he's living. We get pictures every day, but we haven't seen him. We haven't held him because of the coronavirus.
Oh my
we
goodness.
Can't travel to Brooklyn. They can't come down here. But it's funny. Drew is he's a lawyer. He thinks like a lawyer. He used to be a regulator in Washington, D.C. of the local government. Then he went to New York. He's working for us now, and he's handling all of our regulations. He's handling a lot of our business. It's like Bobby and I have handed him the baton, just haven't let go yet because he's has his own ideas. The next generation. My brother and I had different ideas than my father did. My father had a lot of different ideas from this father, who's got some different ideas than we do. Every generation has ideas. Carlito has the same thing with his dad and his kids. Everybody's got different thoughts here. But a lot of confidence in Drew. He's politically savvy. He's more direct than I am. He thinks like a lawyer. He doesn't beat around the bush. He and Carlos's Karen Smith, who's the chief administrator at Fuente headquarters here in Tampa. They're both lawyers. They think like lawyers. I remember when we got involved with this FDA crap about 10 years ago. I got so mad, and I said, Drew, this is how in the world could they do this, this, and this? He said, Dad, you can't let your emotions get a hold of you. You have to look at the world through their eyes, not through your eyes, through their lens. I don't have the patience for that. He does, so it's he's still working at it, and I want to wring FDA's neck for what they're doing to us. I mean, even now, there's like 39 million people have lost their jobs in the last 7 to 8 weeks, and they're still dickering with these regulations that could put us out of business. And this is the last time. This is the last thing they should be doing. I don't want to get in this tangent of FDA, but anyway. Drew's handling it. We hand him the ball. He's calm. He knows people, and he's helping push all of us have been working so hard. I see Carlito's there. He's got a lot of thoughts, I'm sure, too, trying to push this ball over the goal line so we get relief. We're talking about it 12 hours ago. I would say it's not all we talk about. It kind of is, though, in recent days, because that's but Carlito and Bobby and I are kind of new kids. I mean, Carlito and Bobby are in the 60s, I'm 70s. But I remember when we started, but Carlos's father were around and my fathers were around, they said, kids, this is nothing. Let me tell you what life was like back when Cuba in Bargo. Another thought I was having, and we've been with the Fuente started making cigars for us, La Unica in 1986, and we started representing Fuente in 1990. The cigar business has been on a great run. But the reason why the Newmans and the Fuentes are humble folks because we've been through the mill. Right now, we through a lot of hard work and through a lot of good fortune, we're doing well. But it's not always been that way. I remember when Curlhead was a 15-cent cigar, and so the same was our cigar in the 1980s. The business sucked. If you know anybody that got in the cigar business in the 90s or 2000s, they say, hey, it's a pretty cool business from the cigar boom on. But in the 90s and in the 80s, think about the 1980s, life was kind of good to some point. There's no cigar taxes. You can smoke anywhere, and the government left you alone. I told this to somebody last week. I said, those are the great days. Those weren't the great days. These are the great days. When business sucked and cigar industry was going down 4 or 5% a year in the 80s, it wasn't a fun business. Here comes the cigar boom. Business gets stronger. Thank you to Marvin Schenken. Cigars have become a lot of credibility, a symbol of celebration. Cigars have a status symbol. Because cigar industry got so popular, so high profile, then come the taxes, then come the regulations, then come the smoking bans. It's a pain in the butt for all of us. But I would take these days today with all of our problems. Hope to bite my words here. I take these days, as long as we beat FDA, than the crap days. I say Carlos there. Carlos, you remember back in the 1980s? I mean, how business, you're on the top of the heap now, but you remember the 1980s and 70s? The business was tough, wasn't it?
The 70s were even worse than the 80s, I would think, for us. I remember the 70s. It was very difficult. Interest rates were hitting 20%.
Right.
Business was falling, every year. You couldn't raise a cigar 5 cents. If you raise it 5 cents, you lose 10% of your business, if not more. Factories were closing or selling out every year. Every year there'd be one less factory, and things were very, very difficult. You didn't see, there was no one. I remember I was the baby in the industry. I mean, I was the baby. And I remember Bobby with his long hair, you know, and everything. Bobby Newman, the Playboy, known as the Playboy of Tampa. And, you know, young, good looking, and still good looking, but young and everything. We were kids. I mean, we were really kids. There was no one, I know of no one of my generation, of my age, of my generation, that entered the cigar business in the 70s like I did in 1972, full time. I know no one else. Everybody else, they went into different businesses. There was, you know, they said the writing was on the wall, the cigar business was going to end. And everybody of my generation that come from tobacco families, they went into other areas. It wasn't into the late 80s or even the 90s when the boom, when a lot of people started coming into the industry. So, you know, we were, the only reason that we're probably here is because we loved our parents so much and the way we were raised about family traditions and our grandparents and the sacrifice they went through, that I think that, you know, the Newmans and the Fuentes, what they have in common is our respect for and our love for our parents and our grandparents, and know that we had to help them, that we had to give them support. And, you know, the 40, 50 years later, here we are. But they were very, very difficult days. And it's a miracle. I tell you what, it's a miracle. If it wasn't for my father's perseverance and that he literally worked around the clock 18, 20 hours and, you know, and his genius, because he, you know, it's a miracle that we survived. We survived during the 70s and it was just very difficult. I mean, even when things were tough, when things started getting better, we went to Nicaragua and then we had a fire, another fire in Honduras, but we just kept going. We just kept going because the most important thing was our family. And there's something that it really pumps our hearts. It's what goes through our body, and that is our brand. That is our brand. There's no distinguishing between our brand, my grandfather's name, and our family. And it was very important for it to survive. And here we are today. We've been partners for many, many years, but I say partners because I want people to know that the Newmans and the Fuente families are partners, but it's more than that. We go back since we're young. We've always been friends, and they're family. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I consider them family. My family considers them family. We are family. We intend to be here for generations to come together. And I have to say, Stanford Newman was one of my mentors. Eric and Bobby's father was one of my great members, one of the men that was respected the most in the great cigar city of Tampa, Ybor City. He was a leader. He was the president of all the associations. When people were selling cigars for 30 cents, he was selling them for 55 cents, or 26 cents, he was selling for 50 cents. When people were making cigars in cardboard boxes, he was making them in redwood boxes.
Right.
You know, he was a man who believed in luxury and quality. And, you know, he had, I got to mention too, because if there's ever a saying, behind every great man is a great woman, I have to mention Elaine Newman, who was a real personality, a real pistol, and just what a beautiful lifestyle. And, you know, they were just a beautiful couple. And he was a man that didn't give up. He was a fighter. He didn't give up. I remember a story of Stanford Newman when he came to Dominican Republic with Eric one day, and we were buying another farm right across the river from Chateau de la Fuente. And it was perfect land. I mean, it's really, the only thing that divided that land from Chateau de la Fuente was a river. So we go across, and I mean, this place had never been, I don't know, there were stems, weeds, all kind of stuff, barbed wire. I mean, you couldn't hardly walk through it. And my father told Stanford, you know, this goes right to the river. And we could, you know, irrigate our tobacco with the fresh river water that runs from the mountains and this and that. This farm is beautiful. It's ideal. It's going to grow great tobacco. So we're walking in and everything. And then we had to go through a barbed wire fence. So my dad was holding it open, or Eric, I don't remember exactly. Stanford Newman goes to go through. He goes like that. He catches his leg in a barbed wire, gashes his leg, bleeding all over the place. And we still had to walk at least a block or a block and a half through all kind of obstacles. We didn't know what we were walking through. And I remember Stanford Newman taking out his white handkerchief, clean white handkerchief. He always had his handkerchief, you know, his perfectly starched white shirt, perfect collar. And, you know, I remember him rolling up his legs and getting the handkerchief, putting it on there. And he says, I want to see the river. And this man was in his 80s, you know, so it's just an incredible human being. I mean, we got stories that could go back that these are the things, Eric, that you were mentioning, and Bobby. Things weren't always the way they are now, you know.
Oh, my God.
We're fortunate. We got huge teams, and we got great teams and support. And but you know, back then with my father and your father, man, they went out there, they looked at the land, they dug in and they grabbed the soil and they smelled it, you know. And another story I wanted to say about your father, but I want you to speak. I don't want to speak.
No.
He taught me at a very young age, because you know he was much older than my father and everything. He was always in Cuba buying his tobacco. For some reason, your father loved Havana. He loved Havana for some reason. He told us quite a few good stories about his days. But I remember he used to tell me, everybody, we used to go check all the farms, and we knew the year before the crop which was going to be the best tobacco by the amount of shit they had piled up for fertilizer.
That's right.
But I never forget that your father said, we the year before we go, that's going to be good tobacco, because they can tell by the amount they had accumulated of the manure. But no, there's just endless stories, But this program is about you, your family. So please, I want to hear some of those stories and some of the things that you passed down to your sons, of things that your father went through, and even your grandfather, which the stories are endless.
Oh, absolutely. I remember Dad used to tell us, because he learned it from his father, the story of the man who cried and cried because he had no shoes until he saw the man who had no feet. I think that's the way. I never speak for the Fuente family, and publicly or privately, but that's kind of been our mantra. And I tell you, today, like Eric said, today are the good old times. I remember going to. Everybody in the United States has heard of the Breakers. It's in Palm Beach, very elegant place. And I remember driving in there. We were working with our distributor salesperson called Eli Witt, big company. They had branches all over the South. And we were going to put a Questore humidor in there. And I remember driving in there, and I saw somebody, he must have been 18, 19 years old, and he was playing croquet, and he had an ascot. Back then, if you saw someone with an ascot, either they were a jackass, or they were trying to advertise, hey, I'm better than you are. They look ridiculous. And the reason I tell that story, I've told this many times, is because if you saw someone back in 1970 or in the 70s, a young person smoking a cigar, they would look ridiculous. Only old people smoke cigars, or in the actors in the Western or in the movies. And today, now that whole generation that whole age has come down to 21, and you go into a typical good smoke shop today in the United States or overseas. I go to Europe every year. That you'll see young people. You'll see something that you never saw. You'll see a lot of women too that are now in the industry, and it's the whole playing field has gotten bigger, which is an opportunity for all of us. And my father pounded it into Eric and me, as long as you make something of quality, you can last for hundreds of years. And we have never forgotten that. Eric?
A couple of stories that Dad told. Dad joined the business in 1934 in a downtown Cleveland business area. And my father sent to Connecticut, look at tobacco. In the late 1930s, bought a lot of tobacco from the Coleman family. Carlito knows them, the Colemans. They grew through Connecticut shade. My father and grandfather looking at tobacco with the salesman from Coleman. My father was new in the business then, and he had experience I never forgotten. He looks at this hand of tobacco, and he tells my grandfather, "Dad, this tobacco is great. Look how it stretches. Look how it burns." picks out next standard of tobacco, and he lights it and said, "Dad, this tobacco is wonderful. We ought to buy it. We ought to buy it." My grandfather blew a gasket. Grandpa JC did. He asked the Coleman salesman to get out of the room there. He said, "I want to talk to my son." My grandfather read the riot act up my father up one side and down the other. He said, "Stanford, you never comment on how good tobacco is in front of us salesmen. You just cost me 25 cents a pound. The good leaves take care of themselves. You're supposed to look at the bad leaves." I've never, ever forgotten that. Even to this day, when a salesman has a territory and looks, "Gee, how is your business? Because so many counts are up, so many counts are down." I've never forgotten that. Your counts are up, that's great. The good leaves take care of themselves. Look at the counts that aren't good. The good leaves take care of themselves. I've never forgotten that story. Still remember that. I remember my grandfather used to fall in love with tobacco, broadleaf. He would he'd buy tobacco from Lancaster Leaf, and he spent so much money. And my father comes back off a sales trip and said, "Dad, what'd you get all this tobacco?" So I love tobacco. My father said, "Well, Dad, what are you gonna do with it?" "I don't know, but you can never lose on good tobacco." And Dad, you have to have a plan. My grandfather was first generation. He makes sometimes these decisions off his hip. And life was good, except the end of the year we had to pay the tobacco, and the banks didn't want to loan him money. So my father had to go back to the people, to Lancaster Leaf, to Harry Hitchcock, and have them sell the tobacco back to him, and for a couple months, and borrow the money back from the banks. My grandfather was impulsive. My father was very methodical. One day, my father, we were having trouble in Tampa. We getting filled with tobacco from Puerto Rico, and it had knots in it. And you can't put knotty tobacco in a cigar machine because you can't draw through it. So my father goes up on the cigar, on the filler department, the third floor, gets all the supervisors of the women. He puts women out there, says, "And when you sit by this table, all the tobacco comes down this ramp. You open up all the tobacco, flatten it out, and then go on the machine." They have a good system down. Then my father goes on a trip for 2 weeks, comes back and just goes back upstairs when he gets back in Tampa and check on his project, and it's not there anymore. He says, "What are you doing?" I set this whole project to keep knots from coming out of this Puerto Rico tobacco. And now you're going back to the old way. The cigars aren't going to draw through the machines. He said, "What'd you do?" He said, "Well, Stanford, as soon as you left and went on your trip, your father came up here. He saw what you were doing." He says, "That's not the way to do tobacco. We got to do it the old school." And we had to go back to the old way. My father and grandfather butted heads a number of times. One time, my grandfather traded some cigar machines to Carl Berger. Carlito knows Carl Berger, knew him, and
Eric,
Yes.
there's not many living people nowadays that know or remember Carl Berger. You're going back.
My grandfather
traded, of course, Carl Berger. Wow.
He gave him a machine for tobacco, and my father said we needed that machine to make cigars a certain size. My grandfather didn't care about the machine. He wanted Carl Berger's tobacco, and he was very impulsive. So my father and grandfather, here's a great story. Business, we had the #1 selling nickel cigar in the Midwest. Let me back up a second. We had 2 cigar booms in our history. One was in the 90s. The first one was during World War II, where the government bought 35% of Carlos's production, our production, every cigar manufacturer's production. The first 35% of your production for cigar manufacturer went to the government. It's supposed to be sent to our boys, the foxholes in Germany, for them to smoke cigars. But after the war, the government they said, "We want to return all these cigars." They didn't rotate the inventory. They put them in warehouses. Half the cigars never went to Germany. My grandfather was not going to take them back. He told the government, said, "You bought these cigars, the government, you're stuck with them." "Well, Mr. Newman, you better take back these cigars, because what's going to happen is we represent the taxpayer. We're going to sell them to a liquidator for maybe 10 cents on the dollar. The liquidator will sell to a distributor, one of your customers, also canning tobacco distributors for maybe 50 cents on the dollar. You're going to get stuck with them anyway. Besides, you don't want to have all these dry cigars in the market with your bands on them, with your name on it. You got to take them back. My grandfather grudgingly took them back after World War II, and life was awful. Every day, we're getting more cigars back in returns than we were shipping. Well, one day, in the late 1940s, my father goes with my grandfather to Cuba. And when you're growing tobacco, Carlito knows more than I. Maybe it grows. There's different primings up to the top. The thinner tobacco is in the lower primings. The thicker tobacco is on top. The higher primings, you got secos in the bottom, visos, ligeros. The top part with the Corona, what the Cubans were doing was just plow it under. It wasn't that. It was just heavy tobacco. They weren't using it. So my father made a deal with them. Said to the farmer, if we took that tobacco, if you harvested it for us, we sell it to us at a low price. And they said, sure, we aren't using it now. We'll sell it to you for 75 cents a pound. My father bought this tobacco in 1949. He came out with a cigar called Cameo. Cameo became the #1 nickel cigar in the Midwest. They're making 1 million cigars a week. Nickel cigars were big back in those days. One day, my father and grandfather go on a selling trip to Niles and Mosier. It's a string of maybe 25 distributors in Midwest, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas. And Mr. Moser looks at my father and says, we love your company's nickel cigar, Cameo. We want to make our Cameo's nickel cigar. I'm going to give you an order for 500,000 cigars a week. My father was elated. It was his baby, came out with Cameo, saved the company, leaves the room there, calls the office. And my grandfather told Mr. Moser, who gave him the order for nickel, my grandfather said, thank you for the order, but we aren't making any money at a nickel. Come Monday, it's going to 6 cents. Mr. Moser said, we don't want a 6-cent cigar. We want a nickel cigar. My grandfather was stubborn. I want to make it, it's going to be 6 cents. My father comes back in the room, hears this conversation, knows what exactly what's going to happen. Sure enough, we had the #1 selling nickel cigar in the Midwest, 1950. But my grandfather raised it from 5 cents to 6 cents. They lost half their business in 3 months.
Wow.
You know, that's a very good point, Eric, and I'm glad you brought that up because I mentioned that a lot about the 70s, that you go up a nickel cigar and you would lose. People were so price sensitive, and it was so difficult, and it's just amazing, you know, and that's why people were restricted from using the best quality woods and packaging and things like this because everything was so cost sensitive. But one thing I like for you and Bobby to speak about, because in the 60s, 70s, you know, especially the late 60s and mid 60s, you know, your cigar was the #1 premium cigar, most expensive long filler cigar. And you were the first with Cameroon wrapper. Speak a little bit about that, Bobby. I remember you always in Paris and descriptions.
Right. Yeah.
And I was there with Richard and Heller, and you know, talk about those days when you sold cigars. When your family sold cigars for twice the price of everyone else, and how you used Cameroon, and how your father loved Cameroon, how he felt about Cameroon.
Absolutely. And in 1964, there are approximately 10 large factories in Tampa. In 1964, the embargo was 1961. Everybody ran out of Cuban tobacco. No more wrapper, filler, or binder. And what saved our family company was Dad switched to this new tobacco no one had ever used in the United States. No one even, it's called Cameroon. No one ever heard of the country Cameroon, Africa. No one could identify it. But he went in 1965. He took my mother. They went to Paris at this tobacco auction, and it was more expensive than the Cuban tobacco. But Dad was always an innovator. He came out with a cigar called Cuesta number 95. My father used to go to the local, it was called Moss. Carlito, you remember Moss Brothers, of course. And my father, he liked to go shopping with my mom. He was always looking at different packages. And he loved, at the time, Chanel number 5 was the #1 selling perfume. And Dad loved the name 5, so he came up with the word 95. And everybody in the industry in Tampa and the entire premium cigar industry was based, probably 90% of it was in Tampa at the time. Everyone was making cigars and they box pressed them. So they were kind of like a box press, meaning like square cigars. Dad said, we're going to do it different. We're going to come out Cuesta number 95, Cameroon wrapper. It'll be in the round, be a round cigar. And we're going to put 2 bundles. We'll pack them in ribbons. There'll be 25 cigars packed with a beautiful yellow ribbon. And we'll do 2 of those. We'll have a box of 50 cigars. And the entire industry was 2 for 55 cents. Bering Plaza, they were making about 150,000 cigars a day, a long filler. Bering Plaza, these people were so powerful, they can make the toilets in Tampa flush at the same time. And so Dad always had a philosophy that we have 5,000 soldiers, our competition has 100,000 soldiers. If you try to meet them head on, you'll get crushed. You got to go around them. My father was so innovative. So he came out of the Cuesta 95 cigar, was in the round, and it took off. And it was, people started, they just loved the taste of the Cameroon. Dad took Eric and I in 1970 was our first trip to Paris. And we met Rick Meerapfel, your father, and Heller. And I remember Dad said, we can only buy the first priming. And we said, well, Dad, what about the third, fourth, and fifth primings? He said, those cigars can be put on the handmade. Carlito, I've never told you the story that Dad said the third, fourth, and fifth primings can be put on the handmade cigars. We were making cigars by machine. When you had, Carlito, I don't know if this is true, you would know it more than Eric and I would, but Dad said, the reason you can use third, fourth, and fifth priming Cameroon is because you can stretch that wrapper. And when you make a cigar by hand, you can only stretch it so much on the tobacco die. And Carlito, I never told you this story either, or anyone, but Eric I went to the Cameroon tobacco auction, and I think it was 1972 by myself. Eric was an Air Force ROTC, and he would have gone to Vietnam, but he had to go to a camp in the summertime. You remember that, Eric? And he missed the auction. So it was just Dad and me.
Camp, Bobby. I was doing my 4 weeks of training. It's not a camp. It was training. No. It was a military camp. Anyway, so Dad. But anyway, I watched our father, spend $800,000. We were buying a gambula. You remember the rig, the gambula, the OLBs, and my dad loved the BB. He loved the BBs because they were dark and a little larger sizes. Same price today, right, Rick?
Oh my God!
Well, in those days, Cameroon was about this big. It was tiny little leaves, right?
But for our 7-inch cigars, we had to buy bigger tobacco. It was hard and expensive.
That's why he was buying the first and second priming, because the first and second in those days were a little bit longer and a little bit larger, and you could stretch it out a bit more if you wanted to get. Were you using single dies or double dies in those days?
Single dies.
Single, so you could stretch it out, and you could get a few more cuts probably on the leaf.
Yeah, well, but also I watched Dad spend $800,000 of money we didn't have, and he was jumping. I've never seen Eric. He was jumping up, and Carlito jumping up and down. We got the tobacco, because it's all on sealed bids. It was terrible, because if you bid too high, you couldn't make any money for the whole year. If you bid too low, you wouldn't get the tobacco. And so
that was the disaster of Cameroon in those days, and the French were cornering the market.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. And it was, let me tell you though, in 1970, first trip to Paris, and we visit with my mom and dad. We went to Portugal and Madrid, and we went to Zurich. And my mom, for his birthday, she bought my father this new famous watch called, or it wasn't new, but it was new for him, called a Rolex. And walking down, Rick, you'll love it. We're walking down in downtown Zurich, beautiful, weather's perfect. It's in June after the Cameroon auction, and we go into some smoke shops, of course, and you could not. It was 99.99% Cuban. You could not give away a non-Cuban cigar. And I told my father, I said, God, that was 50 years ago. Someday someday we're going to be able to sell cigars in Switzerland and the rest of Europe. And that day obviously has come. And we're, you know, the only problem about this, Rick, is that Eric and I and Carlito, or all of us, we could tell stories for the next 5 hours. So I'll shut up now.
5 hours for the next 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to realize here that, you know, we've been speaking about family business for the last few shows, but this show is very, very special. You know, probably you have 3 of the oldest family businesses in the world in our business, which is actually on the show today. The Fuente family, who have been around for close to 110 years. The Newmans, 125. The Meerapfels, 140, almost 145. I mean, this is close to 400 years of business right here and 15 generations. It's insane. And I hope this one on YouTube is going to go a long way, because this is history in the making right here.
Well, it's important. Listen, I want to tell you one quick. We have so many great stories on Carlito and his dad, but I want to tell you a couple quick stories in 60 seconds. The Fuentes in our family we used to fight over the pancake house, and it was where it was open 24 hours a day. If you got it in the pancake house, you could sell a lot of cigars. It's very prestigious. It's still there. I remember, Carlito, you remember Martin's Pharmacy on Dale Mabry?
Of course.
I remember seeing my first. It was like 1962, 63, and Eric and I loved the business. And I saw a man, and gentleman, and he was carrying a whole case on his shoulder of curly heads, 15 cents, and they had display of other Fuente cigars and Brevis. I remember going home and asking Dad. I said, Dad, how can they sell it? We were making Rigoletto Palma Grandes, and we were selling them for 15 cents. I said, Dad, how can they make cigars by hand for 15 cents a piece? He said, well, they're very special people. I said, I don't know. But I remember it. And Fred Zanaboni and I, who was the first sales manager for Fuente back in the 70s, he and I, we didn't fight over the airport. We shared the airport business, and that was very prestigious. We had our packs, and I remember the first time I ever saw Montesino. Montesino was selling like for 80 cents. The Questre 95 at the time was 80 cents. Ours was machine made, and Montesino was handmade. I remember asking my father, how can they do that? And he didn't have a good answer. But here we are, almost 50 years later, and we're all together. But
let me share something with you, Bobby, and the rest of the world. In 1981, I would say, because we came to the Dominican Republic in 1980, we sold more Montesinos than we were selling through the Fuente handmaids. Montesino was huge. Montesino was huge brand in the Midwest, with Wrangell, Chicago alone. Montesino we sold more Montesinos than we did Fuente outside of the Cuban markets, Tampa, Miami, New Jersey, New York. Those were basically the markets. And till Fred Zanaboni came in and started traveling and going to smoke shops and so forth. To see a box of Fuente in a tinner box or something was like, it was a big accomplishment. So when you look back to the 70s and look today how the world has changed, and you know, and how fortunate we have to join forces and everything, because it's been a magic formula and it's worked out. If you look back, it's not that long ago.
No.
To Melanie there, she doesn't.
Melanie, my father used to say,
that long ago.
yeah, I know. Getting with the Fuentes.
Changed.
Oh, well, when it can the CR thing.
You know, my father used to say, getting with the Fuentes, it's 2 + 2 = 5. And that's because of the synergies there. It's just been absolutely amazing.
Awesome.
We've had our family's been up and down like every other family, and we certainly have been blessed. You never forget where you come from, and you can be taken out of the ball game at any time. And as we all know, Eric, I've been talking too much.
Listen, we all know that It's an honor for us here in our program to have three of the oldest family-owned, well, two family-owned cigar companies and one of the greatest growers of tobacco in the world, the Meerapfel family. So my question to Eric and to Bobby, which I've known for 23, 24 years, is so how hard is it, Bobby, to you to convince Eric of something? And Eric, how hard is it for you to convince Bobby of something?
Great question. Eric, I'll let you answer that first.
It's probably harder for me because Bobby directs our sales and Bobby's got a salesman mentality, and Bobby can sell and he could use, I won't say half truths, but he can embellish. You know how salesmen can be.
Oh, never. No, Eric.
I am honest to a fault. Not that salesmen aren't, but I'm pretty black and white, and Bobby will be. Bobby gets on a tangent and he won't let go, which is both a blessing and a curse. And sometimes it's more of a curse. Oh, it's a blessing too. So anyway, we go hand in hand, and Bobby and I see eye to eye most of the time. You know, we're fortunate. Carlito knew my father, my uncle. They didn't get along as well as Bobby and I do. And we're very fortunate that there's no jealousies. There's the truth of it is there's more things need to be done every day than there are Newmans. We have our fourth generation of Drew getting involved in this. There's just not enough hours in the day, so we all go in our different areas on major decisions. We get together, but there's again, there's a lot of things that we're working on. We're both working on politics. Bobby gets emotional when it goes to lobbying for FDA, as I do, but he tries to use logic with them, and that doesn't always work. But for the most part, we get together. We have a meeting on it, and I convince him most of the time. But I convince Bobby most of the time my way more than he can convince me. And Bobby, you may have a different view of that.
Well, I tell you, if I was down to my last dollar, I'd give Eric 50 cents or 51 cents. I know this is a public.
That's all.
I know this is a public forum, Jose, but I would say this, that when Dad was growing up, he grew up with his 4 sisters and 2 brothers, and his father he spoke a very heavy Hungarian accent, a real hard ass, and he wouldn't let my father go to camp. He said, you're 13 years old, you're going to go work in the factory. And so my father never learned how to throw a football or baseball. So Eric basically helped raise me, and he showed me how to throw it the first time. Listen, he taught me how to ride a bicycle. He taught me how to throw a football, how to throw a discus, a shot put. And so it's a very unusual relationship. But I got to tell you, to give me 60 seconds, I have 2 favorite Carlito stories. Carlito, I don't know if you remember this, but in 1988, we did the first cigar dinner. We were in Sarasota, Florida, and I was with you, and at like a very fancy country club. And somebody asked Carlito, and because I get this asked all the time. Someone said, "Mr. Fuente, what's your favorite cigar?" Carlito thought about it. He said, "How can you choose among your children?" What a great answer. And the other thing, the only time Carlito probably has gotten very angry at me, we were at a Big Smoke in I don't know, New York or something like that. And
I know what's coming next. I know what's coming next, Bobby. Go on.
So we were Eric and Carlito had started the cigar family, the complex, the school, and we started the medical clinic and so forth. And I knew the mission was so sacred. And I told at the time, it was a guy named David Luther that was helping us down in the Dominican Republic. And I said, "David, we're going to raise $1 million." I said, "I guarantee you." And Carlito heard about it. He came to me. He said, "Bob," because Carlito said he was pissed. He said, "Bob, you shouldn't say that. You can't do that." You remember, Carlito?
No, I thought it was impossible to ever reach a goal like that, to raise $1 million for the children of, the needy children in the Dominican Republic. Bobby, tell them how much we've raised up to now.
Well, it's funny, but now we've raised just under $23 million. And let me tell you, if you build it, and I quote you all the time, Carly, if build it and they will come. That's from the Field of Dreams. And we got Cigar Aficionado. They gave us a lot of money. We have first-class baseball. I mean, this is better than anything in Tampa. And we built I've told the story a million times. It was from kindergarten to 8th grade. 4 weeks after the grand opening in 2004, Carlito calls my brother and said, Eric, we have a problem. Eric said, how can we have a problem? We just have this beautiful school. The kids are getting uniforms. They're getting 2 hot meals a day, a world-class education. And Carlito said, well, the 8th graders are complaining they have no place to go. And so we borrowed Carlito
For high school.
for high school. So Carlito and Eric borrowed $1 million from the Bank of Tampa, and we built a high school. And from there, we built a medical clinic. We have to raise $850,000 a year just to keep it going. And I told this story a million times too. I wear, here's my watch. I wear a Casio watch, you know, the old, you know, you can buy them for $10. There you are. You can buy them for $10. So Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, everyone's heard of them. It's they have a watch company called Hublot. And if my wife wanted to buy one, I would kill her because they're like $30,000. Well, they came to Carlito. I hope I'm telling the story right. They came to Carlito and they wanted to come out with a limited line of FFOX watches, Fuente Opus X watches. And the story I heard, Carlito, was that you thought about it and you said, yeah, I'll do it. They wanted to give them a royalty, but I want all the money to go to the Cigar Family Charitable Foundation. And so Carlito got over $400,000 and we built a tech school. We now have a nursing school down at the school. And Sergio, who runs it now, he told me it's the largest building in the whole region. It's like 10,000 square feet. And what is going on there is absolutely amazing. In February, we go down there a lot. We brought Richard Gonzmart down, who owns the Columbia restaurant in Tampa. And I knew he'd never go down there, but we got private transportation down there, and to see what has gone on there. So we visit the school. We're with 7 other men, and Marty Schaffel brings his plane. We go in there, and Ciro says, we got a little surprise for you. And we're walking into the medical clinic, and the kids they have American and Dominican flags, and they speak in French, Spanish, and English. And all of a sudden, he said, I'd like to bring out the new medical director. And it was Nelson, who had started at Cigar Family at the school as a 10-year-old, and he's now the medical director for the Cigar Family Charitable Foundation complex. And I got so emotional. I was like on my knees practically. And here is a young man who his family were so poor they didn't have an outhouse, and now he's a physician because of the Cigar Family Charitable Foundation. And this is what happened. Our goal was to break the bonds of poverty down there, and the rest is history. We've got 2 other kids in medical school, and these young men and women, they're coming back. Ampara she's one of the computer teachers. We don't want them to go. Carlito would say, we don't want them to go to New York and to do bad things. We want them to stay there, help the people of the Dominican Republic. And it's been an incredible trip, and we're all very passionate about it. Eric, you want to say something?
You did great, Bobby. All right. It's, we have a lot of people that support Cigar Family Charitable Foundation, and Americans, I guess, people are among the most generous people in the world, and same in Europe. Those from the great countries, those from developing countries aren't used to giving back. Philanthropy is not that popular, but we've gone to these countries, and I remember Carlito and I were back in 2000, maybe 1990, 1999. I was riding with Carlito, and we were right around the Chateau de la Fuente, and we saw these kids playing in the street. And I said, why aren't they in school? And he said, well, there's not enough classrooms in the area, that the schools are in double session, but still there's not classrooms. And we talked about, we just going through a cigar boom, and we agreed, we thought that we wanted to give back to Dominican people, to thank them for growing the best tobacco, making the best cigars in the world. So we're going to build a wing on a. First one, we try to build a wing on a school, and in the area, and then Carlito runs into a fellow, this David Luther, who Carlito said, we want to help people. We want to build the wing on a school, and Dave was telling Carlito, you don't want to get involved with the government. You want to build your own school. And so with a lot of effort, we bought, with our Cigar Family Foundation, 23 acres. It had a different location. As soon as they found out that the Fuente name was associated with it, the prices went up. So we had to have somebody else buy the land for us. And we started in September 6th, 2004. And Bobby, told the story. We had opening day, 800 people there. We had the media, the politicians, the parents, grades pre-K through 8th grade, and life was great. And then Carlito called me, as Bobby was saying, and a bunch of 8th grade girls, not just the girls, 8th grade girls got a hold of Carlito and said, we love our school. The closest high school is a hour away walking. We need to we need a high school. And Carlito called me, and is that right, Carlito?
That's right. Yes. No problem.
He said, I said, we have no money. So he and I, Carlito and I co-signed a loan, Bobby said, for $1 million to make a Tampa. And fortunately, it was it still is a great project. But normally in business, you have a project, you raise the money, and then you build. We did it the other way around. Saw the need, we built, and we had to raise the money. Fortunately, it's worked. And you go down there, and the Cigar Family Project is one of the poorest areas of the Dominican Republic. But these people don't know that they're poor. They don't know their life is built, that is giving them a tough hand being born in a third world country. That you go down the project, they're happy, there's smiles, they're learning English, they're learning math and science, and they've, as Bobby mentioned, it's been going through cycles of poverty. First generation to ever go to high school, let alone graduate from high school, let alone to go to college. And the only way to break that cycle of poverty is through education. And it's in giving back. These kids are finally starting to get it. Carlito would tell stories about whenever the people there in the area wanted something, they have to burn tires in the streets, and then the government would give them something, or if it's near election time, they build roads or sidewalks or whatever, that they really have to complain. But now these people really get it, that they so much so, feel they have an obligation to give back themselves. A couple of years ago, some kid came up to me and he says, Newman, he would call me Newman, he calls Carlito Mr. Fuente. He says, Newman, when I'm old like you and Mr. Fuente, I hope I have an opportunity to give back to the kids like you've done for us. I thought, except for saying when I'm old like you, Mr. Fuente, it was a beautiful statement, because they finally get it, that they have an obligation. And you go back to the project and you see Lisa, and you see Nelson, and these kids coming back to be teachers, to be the doctors, the nurses. Emilio's the assistant music director. Everybody knows Emilio, and they have an obligation to help out. And it's a great thing, passing out from one generation to the next generation. We've had 11 graduating classes, about 80% going to college. First generation to go to college, and it's a great thing. And Nelson, Bobby's mentioning Nelson. Carlito used to tell a story that with Nelson, he started in 10 years old at Cigar Family School. When he was a little kid, his dream was always to become a doctor. Always wanted to become a doctor. He lives in the poorest areas of the Dominican. His mother would tell him, get that silly notion out of your head. Our kind of people, poor people, you aren't going to become a doctor. If you're lucky, you'll be able to work on the Fuente farm. And that's the rest of your life. But Mom, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. Well, long story short, he went to Cigar Family School, did great in school, he got a scholarship, went to college, went to medical school. He just graduated from medical school a couple of weeks ago. Didn't have a ceremony. Sent us some pictures. But now he's the medical director of our Cigar Family project. And we got the nicest, the best equipped medical clinic in the area. And there's a lot of nervous people now with the coronavirus, and they go see him. He thinks he has a calling. and to help all the people in the areas. There's like 10 communities around there, helping all of them. It's in his heart, body, and soul. And if it wasn't for Cigar Family, he would not have an opportunity to help these people. And still another one of Carlito-isms there. You go to the project, it doesn't say Fuente, it doesn't say Newman, it says Cigar Family, which means anybody that supports our mission, whether you're a cigar smoker or not, if you believe in helping people that need help, you're a member of the Cigar Family group.
Yeah.
So we're very proud.
Absolutely. No, I'm reading the messages as they come in, and there's a lot of people viewing who are members of Cigar Family, support Cigar Family. And I was asked by Richard Myberg to let everyone know they could give as little or as much as they want. But one thing I want to add to what Eric was saying, all these students who are now professionals, we have architects, we have teachers, we have entrepreneurs. There's a young man by the name of Mauri that has a company, a transportation company in the area. All these students who are now professional, and I think it's close to 90%, Eric, that moved on to university. All these students who are now professional did not move to major cities or move to Punta Cana to work in a tourist industry or move to New York or so forth. They come back to the community to build their community. These are the same students who were once children that were at the age of 6 or 7 years old looking for work in the tobacco fields or looking for work in the mining industry because there were no schools available. And their parents used to tell us, if they don't work, they don't eat that day. So to see the change is just amazing. One thing else I want to add that is very important. Since the day that Cigar Family was founded, the Newman family, we don't know for how long this will continue, but hopefully it'll go on for generations. And Eric is smiling because he knows since the day it was founded, we agreed that all expenses, all administrative, legal, travel, there's 28 salesmen traveling around the country, performing, holding events and everything to raise money for Cigar Family, the Newman family, my entire family. We do the Toast Across America, the packs where we donate the cigars, and 100% goes to raise money, all the different things that we do to be able to raise that money every year. 100% of what is raised, not 99.9, but 100% goes directly to the foundation. And that is something, and all legal, administrative, traveling, everything, 100% of every expense is paid 50% by the Newman family or respective companies and 50% by the Fuente family. So and what Eric says, you'll never see the name Fuente or Newman on that project. You're never going to see any advertisement of any big rum company or any big bank that wants to support. We've been offered serious big money, but they want to put their name. And we've always refused, and we say, no, this belongs to the community. It belongs to the children, to the students, and to every Cigar Family member who's ever contributed. I remember we had a Cigar Family event, and we're all sitting in Puerto Plata, 4 a.m, all day talking. A lot of Cigar Family members have been to the foundation. And there was a person that came from abroad that was involved with the Gates Foundation and so forth, and said that, they could solve all our problems. They could solve all our problems and all our concerns about keeping the foundation going and raising this money. But we should change the name Cigar Family because the word cigar. I had the American Embassy constantly visiting us and everything, USAID. They love our roast pork. They love the music. They love the entertainment. They fall in love with the foundation, everything. But because of the word cigar, they're not allowed to make this contribution. So I was told that we should consider changing the word cigar. And Cigar Family members there at that event that night, JJ, and I remember there was quite a few of the old members, says, Carlito, this was built by people who love cigars, people who appreciate the cigars. And I realized at that time, listen, we'll continue doing what we're doing. And if we're limited by the word cigar, but we've got to be very, very proud and let the world know that was built by people who enjoy cigars from all over the world. And those children today are changing the community. I remember it looked like when you're walking into a village of a Tarzan movie, an old Tarzan movie, Johnny Weissmuller, where you walked into the arena. Today, you see block houses painted, you see gardens, there's sidewalks, there's paved roads, there's electricity where there never was electricity, there's running water. They have their own city council, things that didn't exist. It was known as the most violent community in the Dominican Republic. Today, it's the most peaceful community. It's not only changing a child's life, but it's changing an entire community. And to me, and I know to Eric, Bobby, and Newman family, and to all the Cigar family, you know, there's no cigar magazine cover or any luxury magazine cover or any kind of recognition, any cigar that brings us the pleasure, that gives us the reward of walking into Cigar family and seeing those children in their caps and gowns, how proud they are when they graduate every year, and to see the little children, the smiles and everything. Because I tell you one thing that I've always said, when I came to the Dominican Republic, I came from Tampa, Florida, and what I saw here, I had never seen in my life. So many children without shoes. But I yet, in the 40 years that I've been here, seen the first Dominican child without a smile. They're the happiest people in the world. And I recognize a Dominican, I don't care what part of the world I'm in, without them saying a word, just by their smile. There's something about the Dominican Republic and the happiness of the people and the smile. This is a magical country. And all it takes is a little love. And the love that's been given by all Cigar family members is something that, from something that was misery, complete misery, today is recognized by United Nations as being one of the models of social responsibility giving back. And for that, I thank all Cigar family members of the past, present, and future.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, another testimony of the importance of what the Fuente family are doing, the Newman family are doing, and then, of course, all of you out there who have embraced yourselves to supporting what's right. And again, it's not a coincidence. You put the word cigar and you put the word family next to each other, magic happens.
It's true. One thing, we can't let the show go out because I think one of the most important things that Carlito and the Newmans, and Lito and many other people have done is this fight with the FDA. And I take my hats off because I've been with Eric on the Hill, having dinner, talking with senators and going out there. And I would like to, both of you, Bobby and Eric, to exhort so many consumers to join the CRA, to write to their congressmen, to their senators, because what the FDA is doing is unjust. And I've said it for many years. If you can die for your country at 18, you should be allowed to smoke and drink at 18. Can I get an amen on that?
Amen, bro. A double man. Yes. Yes.
And that means you can smoke 10 times as much if you're in your 60s or 70s.
All right, Bobby, Eric, it's that time of the day. Unfortunately, we got to keep these episodes to more or less an hour, and we have just blown it out of the ballpark once again. But we want to hear a lot more, and we're just gonna have to pull you back on the show. So hopefully, very, very soon, you'll accept to come back on, and we'll be able to continue this conversation because everybody wants to hear a lot more.
We have some more stories that you haven't heard yet, so invite us back. Thank you for inviting us.
No, thank you very much. It was a true honor and
Jeremiah.
pleasure. Gentlemen, it was an unbelievable show. It was a historic show, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We'll get you back on the show very, very soon. But in the meantime, we send you our love. Please take care of yourselves and of each other. And on behalf of the Fuente, the Meerapfel, and the Newman families, we wish you all a happy Fuente Friday. Be safe and see you soon.
Thank you.
Love you all.
Bye.
Love you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.
And keep smiling.
Amen. Amen, bro. Love you.
Love you too.